Why do fewer North Americans think that religion really matters? One of my favorite apologists, Frank Turek, often says that people aren't on a truth quest, they're on a happiness quest. And that's so true. Often we see that volitional or emotional resistances masquerade as rational resistance because nobody wants to say they're having an emotional or volitional reason to deny a truth claim. So I get that. Here's something interesting. There are often ups and downs in the numbers over the years when people are asked the question of, does religion matter to you in your life? Is it very important or not important? So why is that happening? Well, one of the times it rose most prominently happened after the 9/11 attacks in 2001. And there was a short season there of less than 12 months, but during that time, people found that their religion was, for some reason, more important than it had been in years prior. And that, to me, I think gives away the answer. Because, what happened was that people found that they were searching for answers, and they suddenly felt vulnerable. We all felt vulnerable. We felt as though we weren't in control like we thought we were. Our inability to control our own lives had been exposed by 9/11. And in that season that we felt vulnerable, we sought an answer that we didn't think we could provide ourselves. And so we did that by turning to the church, by thinking about more important transcendent spiritual notions, and we started to think about these things. And so the churches were overflowing that first Sunday after 9/11 because people felt vulnerable. They didn't have all the answers. They thought, I'm not in control anymore. Maybe I need to look at a higher source. We need comfort, we need answers, and so they came to church. But like I said, within 12 months later, it was back to normal. So I think, once people get a sense that they are back in control, and we have a short memory for these kinds of things, then we start to drift away from the source of all infinite knowledge. Once we start thinking we have our autonomy back. And so, the more we think that we can find our own answers, the more we think we can rely on things like science for all the answers to things that we used to rely on God for, the less we'll see God as important in our lives. And looking back on that, to me, really exposed what's behind our increasing decline in people saying if religion really matters to their life. The increasing decline in religiosity and of people saying that religion matters is due to our increasing ability to provide our own answers. It's really about autonomy. That's the highest value in North America. Just leave me alone kind of attitude. And we are in an information age. We have an ability to answer many of our own questions, to find answers that may or not actually answer those things, but at least provide something convincing. Of course, in addition to that, we have a rise in what we want morally. In that we don't want anyone to tell us how to behave morally, how to behave sexually, or how to behave in any way. And what does religion do? It provides you with a context in which we are to submit our desires to the will of a holy God. And if that's the case, it's a hard sell to many people in a culture in which autonomy has become the highest value. And so, if people think that God's going to take away their happiness or autonomy, well, so much for God then, right? They're going to do their own thing. But the majority of us, I believe, do still think that religion matters, though it is declining, but in our part of the world anyway. But I always have hope that we still have a culture that's interested in such things. It's just time for us to show that Christianity has answers to things that we can't get on our own. That it has transcendent answers that are only available if you investigate the Christian worldview. But if we're not willing to show that that is the case, if we're just going to toss out Christianity's information like it's no different than anyone else's, as equal, then good luck trying to convince a world that thinks they can find the answers on their own. A person needs to show that Christianity uniquely answers the questions we all have, and in my opinion, it does. Or if we're going to say that Christianity is just a matter of making your life better here on earth, well, you can make your life better here on earth just by doing your own thing too, at least temporarily. So, that's a terrible argument. And the problem is, so then what's the right way to live life if not by our own desires? There was a recent poll that said 51% of Americans say religion is very important in their lives. So that's basically only half. This is down from decades past, of course. So why do fewer people think religion matters? Well, I think the answer is mostly quite obvious. The answer lies in our love of autonomy. I've heard a prominent Christian speaker put it this way, that there is a specific type of desire for moral autonomy that has constantly been rising in our culture. The public opinion is rather more closely divided down the middle than ever before in its views about answering the question of religion as the answer to what ails society. And when it comes to moral autonomy, this comes as more and more people believing that knowing what is right and wrong is a matter of just personal experience. They increasingly say that individuals decide what is morally appropriate, and even that what is morally right or wrong can change over time based on society. But religions make moral assertions that transcend individual belief and cultural consensus. They also make moral claims that require our submission. Unsurprisingly, as people shift toward moral autonomy, fewer people rely on religious systems that make these kinds of transcendent, unchanging ethical claims and demands. This moral autonomy is that people want to do their own thing. And this is many times the reason why people won't become Christians. It's not that they couldn't, it's that they won't. What does this show us about what people really want when it comes to moral autonomy? Well, the existence of objective, transcendent moral truth, moral claims, and moral obligations is really good evidence for the existence of God. But even some Christians, believe it or not, even think that right or wrong is a matter of personal experience, or the individual decides on what is right or wrong. In North America, that's pretty much a majority of adults. This is really the epitome of moral autonomy, that I get to decide. So how can we disabuse or disillusion even Christians of that notion? If individuals get to decide these kinds of things, then who am I to tell any individual that they're not thinking clearly on this issue? Yet clearly most of us would admit that in history there were some moral wrongs that needed to be corrected. So are we saying that back when slavery was accepted by a vast majority of people in a country, it was therefore okay? Well, no. We would say that individuals don't decide that kind of thing is okay. It is okay or not okay based on a transcendent standard that actually transcends culture. There are levels of moral grounding, and the question is, if it's between individuals, then who gets to adjudicate, right? If it's between cultures, who oversees two cultures to adjudicate between? Who's the overarching authority over all these different civilizations in the world? So the point is, you have to follow up the authority and really recognize that at some point there has to be an objective, transcendent authority that is the bottom line for all moral decisions. Morality is relevant to everyone. You can ignore the scientific evidence for a grand designer or creator, but it's pretty hard to ignore the fact that some things, like torturing people, for example, is really objectively wrong, or that the Nazis were really objectively wrong, or that sex trafficking is really objectively wrong. These things are really wrong, and it's not just my opinion or your opinion. So how can anyone say that's all just a matter of opinion? Or here's a question. How would we actually do criminal trials if the nature of truth is just grounded in individuals? Because let's face it, the defense attorney and the prosecutor hold different views, right? But if you're saying that the truth is only rooted in our personal opinion, you could really say that the grand kind of laboratory for testing this is criminal trials, because that's the place where people are going to make claims about an objective truth related to a specific thing, a crime in usually the case, and then we're getting to test theories and ways to persuade others if this is objectively true. And so when they pick their jurors, they eliminate those people who think things like truth is grounded in individual opinion, right? And if you believe that, and they can expose that during the jury picking process, they're not going to put you on the jury, because they know that you can't make a decision that's going to be valuable in the process. Religion is often seen as too hard. It means you have to believe in something that you can't touch or see, that you can't purchase or Google search a how-to for making yourself feel better. The worship of the autonomous self runs deep. What we often see is this kind of volitional objection. When you hear someone say something like, I'm a good person, so I'm not worried about God, or I just don't have time to think about these kinds of things, or I wish Christians would just live their own lives and stop telling me how to live mine. You may be dealing with someone who willfully rejects Christianity because they are unwilling to change their life to embrace the truth. And embracing the truth leads us to acknowledging that we are indeed accountable for ourselves and our actions, and this kind of accountability can be a very uncomfortable thing. So here's a final point. I might be talking about religion mattering or not mattering to people, but it's hard to make the case for religion in general mattering when much religion, in fact, is counterproductive, unless it's biblically sound. The Bible's moral law offers what is much different to just generalized religion, and that's what many are rejecting. But as I've slowly been attempting to make the case for, it's the only one that matters, and is the only one that has the ability to transform a broken world full of broken people.